He made it official today. Not only is he keeping the tariffs on China in place, but he's increasing them. China happens to be one of our largest trading partners, and among the first to feel the sting are American farmers, especially soybean farmers. For nearly 4 decades, U.S. soybean growers have maintained steady trade with China. But these tariffs have seriously shaken that relationship. The Trump administration has also acted to freeze or cancel trillions in federal funding, including billions from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. William Brangham returns to the story. Within just the first 60 days of 2025, U.S. sorghum exports to China, an essential income stream for farmers in Kansas and Texas, plummeted by a staggering 94%. Storage silos, once full of promise, now sit packed with grain no one wants. Does Trump truly understand how his trade moves are gutting U.S. agriculture? Every added tariff feels like another gate slamming shut, cutting off U.S. farm goods from the global market. The chain that once powered millions of jobs is breaking just before the new harvest begins. And if this is just the opening chapter, what happens when soybeans, beef, and corn are next? The most serious farming crisis in decades is quietly building, one that could explode by the next harvest cycle. Stick with 3 Daily News as we break down the numbers, trace the fallout, and find out who will carry the biggest burden: farmers, consumers, or the U.S. economy as a whole. In just 2 months, U.S. sorghum exports to China, previously soaking up nearly 90% of the crop from Kansas and Texas, crashed from over 1.4 million tons to just 78,316 tons. That's a jaw-dropping 94% loss. This isn't a typo. It's a flashing red warning light on every farm income sheet across the Great Plains. The first punch came on March 4th, when Beijing slammed a 10 to 15% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion worth of U.S. farm products, halting spring deals mid-discussion. But sorghum got hit even harder a month later. On April 4th, China raised tariffs to 34% across the board and instantly suspended the export license of key shipper C and Dusa Inc. That move brought everything to a halt. Containers stalled at ports. April and May contracts were canceled under force majeure clauses. The shock hit farmers quickly. USDA data shows domestic sorghum stockpiles jumped 42% to 150 million bushels by March 1st, crashing cash prices even below corn, which is usually cheaper. The USDA now expects just 2.54 million tons in exports for 2024 to 2025, a 6-year low and a 58% cut. For individual farmers, that means tens of thousands of dollars lost before harvest even begins. In Stockton, Kansas, farmer Dan Atkinson says last year's crop still hadn't shipped when the new contract vanished. Chinese buyers asked for an indefinite delay. Grain elevators offered such low bids that selling hurts and storing makes things worse. In Texas, some feedlots started mixing excess sorghum into livestock feed just to limit their losses. But domestic demand can't cover the $1.5 billion sorghum used to earn when shipments reached Guangzhou. While the USDA debates a relief plan, rural cash flow is drying up. Farm banks are tightening credit, seed suppliers want bigger deposits, and fuel prices are rising as logistics get messy. With the summer planting season approaching, farmers are forced to gamble. Plant sorghum and hope for a miracle, or switch to corn or wheat, which face their own tariff troubles. The 94% sorghum collapse is more than just a stat. It's a signal that the America First agenda is turning once productive fields into grain storage wastelands. And if sorghum has already fallen, what's next for soybeans, beef, and corn as the trade gates slam shut? Between May 22nd and 25th, 2025, the USDA recorded a figure unseen in over 30 years. Wheat bookings dropped by 49,100 tons. That means more cancellations than new sales. Most of the blow came from South Korea pulling out of 65,300 tons, and the Philippines canceling 12,000 tons, all in 1 week. The result? A deep red hole in U.S. export balance sheets. Then came a sharp twist. On May 30th, the Philippines turned around and signed a 110,000-ton wheat deal with Australia. U.S. grain was ignored. This despite Chicago wheat prices being at a 2-year low. South Korea followed suit. In early May, milling companies in Seoul demanded more sourcing flexibility, even agreeing to pay more for Russian or Eastern European wheat, rather than depend on Washington's erratic trade approach. The impact hit fast. Every contract meant for Korea was canceled, flipping expected sales into net losses. So why are buyers turning away when U.S. wheat is actually $8 to $12 per ton cheaper? It comes down to two words: trust deficit. After Trump reimposed a 25% tariff on Asian steel and aluminum in April, China retaliated with a 34% tariff on U.S. grains. Even though wheat wasn't targeted directly, shipping companies added a 9 to 12 per ton risk surcharge to U.S. wheat contracts, fearing that more tariffs could close routes. Once insurance and cost are factored in, U.S. wheat is now more expensive than shipments from the Black Sea. A few years ago, this scenario was unthinkable. In the Great Lakes region, the National Grain and Feed Association estimates that more than 2.1 million tons of wheat are stuck in storage, up 37% from last year. North Dakota growers say they're selling at 40 to 50 cents below break even and still can't move product. Some elevators are invoking force majeure to cancel loadouts and avoid late delivery fines. The damage isn't just about missed shipments. America's share of the global wheat market has fallen from 44% in 1980 to just 11%, a record low. Meanwhile, despite sanctions over the war in Ukraine, Russia is ramping up wheat exports to over 40 million tons, taking over as the top supplier to Asia and the Middle East. When countries like South Korea and the Philippines, both among the top 5 U.S. customers, start buying from Australia, Russia, and Eastern Europe instead, the message is clear. Price alone isn't enough. Buyers need policy stability. Analysts from Refinitiv warn that tariffs have turned U.S. wheat into a political risk. Yet feedlots and flour mills require at least 9-month certainty on supply. The fallout is already here. Rural banks now want 15% more collateral for loans. One flour mill in Stafford canceled a $48 million upgrade because they can't guarantee supply. One desperate farm is blending wheat into livestock feed. The last option when selling loses money and storage isn't viable. The global effects are surfacing too. In Manila, the price of Pandesal bread jumped 11% in just 3 weeks due to new shipping costs. Southeast Asian consumers now pay for Washington's trade war, while U.S. farmers lose both income and trust. If something doesn't change, the 94% sorghum disaster could repeat in wheat on a scale 4 times as large. Wheat supports global food security. With export volumes already showing a 49,100-ton deficit in just 1 week, the only question is, when will the numbers shift from red to blood red? U.S. farmers, once proud to feed the world, now watch former buyers turn to Russian, Australian, and Eastern European silos. The wheat crisis of 2025 has begun, and the 11% market share left is just the starting point for a steeper decline if tariffs remain the go-to policy. Then, everything reignited on March 4th. Without hesitation, Beijing suspended soybean import licenses for 3 major U.S. agri-giants and imposed a 10 to 15% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion in U.S. farm products, mostly soybeans. Just 6 weeks later, on April 10th, China doubled down, raising the tariff to 34% on all U.S. shipments. The Phase 1 purchase deal, once hailed as a breakthrough, was now meaningless. The shockwave drove U.S. soybean stocks to 380 million bushels, a 4-year high. The USDA had to slash the 2024 to 2025 average price to just $10.10 per bushel, a level not seen since before COVID. That's a 30% drop from the $14.97 price at the end of 2023, wiping out already thin profit margins across the Midwest. While the Chicago market looks for buyers, Brazil is speeding ahead. In just the first quarter alone, Brazil shipped 17.7 million tons of soybeans to China, a record amount that now makes up over 75% of all Chinese soybean imports from Santos. On May 8th, Buenos Aires signed a $900 million letter of intent to supply soybeans, corn, and vegetable oil to China, an open challenge for U.S. market dominance. The outcome? According to Reuters, U.S. soybean share in China dropped to 68% in the first quarter, while Brazil jumped to 26% and is expected to climb further after South America completes its harvest. In heartland states like Iowa and Illinois, the late spring view is unchanged silos full of golden soybeans. But farmer Gary Schnitke notes that selling at $10 per bushel against a $9.65 cost means farmers are losing money right in the field. So many are switching to corn or leaving land unused, choosing a bad year over a disastrous one. The USDA says U.S. soybean acreage could fall by 4% in 2025. Those staying in soy fill up grain bins, waiting and hoping for a price rebound. But AgriSource warns that if tariffs stay, U.S. soy exports may drop another 20% to just 1.5 billion bushels, meaning recovery is nearly impossible. And markets are reacting. By May, CBOT November futures fell to about $10.20 per bushel, the lowest range since 2020. Analysts at StoneX call this the death line, because once prices slip below $10, more than half of Midwest farms lose money. Meanwhile, in Sao Paulo, Brazilian soybean prices rose 7% as new Chinese orders flooded South American ports. The harsh truth? With China closing its doors and tariffs stacking up, U.S. soybeans are trapped between overflowing silos, falling prices, and foreign competition eating away demand. Sorghum exports have already plunged by 94%. Now soybeans, the crown jewel of U.S. agriculture, are next, pushing the entire Midwest into crisis mode. If the tariff fight doesn't end soon, what's ahead isn't recovery. It's mass bankruptcies in the 2025 fiscal year. The pressure isn't limited to crops. It's hitting United States meat, poultry, and livestock too. In a single move, about 2/3 of nearly 1,000 U.S. meat plants lost their China export licenses when they expired without renewal, jeopardizing $5 billion worth of business. That means every shipment from Kansas, Iowa, or Nebraska risks being rejected or turned around. The second shock came at Shanghai's port. Since March, Chinese customs tightened inspections. U.S. meat containers now must be opened, unloaded, and x-rayed. Many shipments sat too long and were destroyed due to spoilage. The U.S. Meat Export Federation says that storage fees have spiked by $800 to $1,200 per container, and customs clearance times have tripled. Companies pulled back, orders shrank, and ships rerouted to South America to avoid delays. In Chicago, the impact showed up fast. On April 9th, June, lean hog contracts fell to 89.78 cents per pound, an 8-month low. Live cattle prices also dropped as traders feared tariff war-driven consumer cutbacks. That same week, China canceled 12,000 tons of U.S. pork, driving yearly orders to their lowest level. Meanwhile, domestic pork prices fell by another $3.82 per hundredweight in just one day. In simple terms, every 1-cent drop in hog prices erases nearly $15 million a month from the sector, a blow on par with sorghum's collapse. And the port chaos continues. Some frozen meat containers had to be rethawed 3 times, risking bacteria and quality loss. Asian news reports say over $10 billion in U.S. exports, from meat to wood chips, are stuck without clearance due to the looming 125% tariff. When cold storage fills up, companies face 2 ugly options: dump the products at deep discounts in the U.S. market or destroy them outright. Domestic prices plummeted. The USDA projects 2026 hog prices at just $63.50 per hundredweight, down 3% from this year, marking the first multi-year price decline. Even broiler chicken prices in the Southeast fell 7% in April from oversupply. Premium beef also dropped, $2 per hundredweight in the boxed beef market, right after the White House announced a 50% tariff hike. Instead of preparing for the summer grill season, meat plants are reducing hours or doing maintenance. With ports clogged and export licenses in limbo, America's livestock sector is squeezed hard. When China, the third largest buyer, shuts its doors, domestic prices crash below the cost of feed and storage. If tariffs persist, another 1 million tons of U.S. meat exports may vanish within a year, cutting 12 to 15% from hog producers' margins. First sorghum, now soybeans, and livestock next, each domino falling in America's agricultural chain. The farm bankruptcy wave is gaining speed. So far, there's no sign of making farming great again. It's not just about lost exports. America's AG logistics system is completely jammed. The numbers tell the story. Portland, Oregon's outbound volume fell 51% in the first 10 weeks of the year. Tacoma dropped 28%. Los Angeles, the busiest West Coast port, lost 17%. Savannah fell 13%, Norfolk 12%. Each lost percentage equals tens of thousands of tons of grain stuck in storage. In LA, ship traffic fell from 12 vessels a day to just 5. Stevedore shifts were cut, turning bustling piers into quiet container yards. When ships disappear, so do the containers. Kansas sorghum exporters can't find a single 40-footer, and Iowa's soy contracts are delayed due to container shortages. To make it worse, Washington proposed a $3 million surcharge on vessels built in China. As soon as that idea surfaced, MSC threatened to halt sailings, and United Grain warned freight costs could soar 40%. Global buyers are already moving on. Austria switched to Australian barley, repeating the sorghum story. When prices rise or ports jam, customers vanish. And while exports stall, input costs skyrocket. In March, Canada struck back with a 25% tariff on $30 billion in U.S. goods, including farm equipment and pesticides. The worst hit? Potash. 80% of America's supply comes from Canada. Analysts from Illinois and Ohio say each ton could cost $100 more. That means a 2,000-acre corn farm in Nebraska must find $60,000 more just for fertilizer. As costs climb and cash flow dries up, the USDA paused new credit lines and delayed support payments. Silos sit idle. Dairy barns are mothballed. One Montana farmer holds $648,000 in feed mill loans while banks tighten credit limits. North Dakota wheat farmers need 15% more margin just to buy summer seed. Defaults are looming across the entire farm credit network. It's a two-sided disaster. Exports locked down, imports taxed heavily. Corn sold in Chicago now nets less than 8 cents per bushel, far below the 40 cents before tariffs. Freight and fertilizer alone have eaten 12 cents per bushel, and the system feeds its own failure. Fewer sailings mean fewer boxes. Higher costs cause more cancellations. Inventories balloon, prices crash, and credit dries up. Unless policy changes soon, corn, wheat, and feed grains could mirror sorghum's 94% collapse, bringing the worst ag shipping logjam since World War II. Bottom line, tariffs aren't just walls to the outside world. They've become cages trapping American farmers in a dead-end loop of costs, delays, and vanishing buyers. Without intervention, it's not a question of how much more U.S. exports will fall, but how long rural America can hold out. Just look around. Sorghum is dead, wheat contracts are deep in the red, soybeans are rotting, and rural services are breaking apart. At the start of the year, Landis, Iowa's largest grain co-op, laid off 55 workers, 10% of its workforce, due to restructuring, though everyone knows exports vanished. Down in Kansas and Nebraska, grain elevators operate just 3 days a week. Former handlers now look for work in retail or auto repair, and the credit backbone is breaking. First quarter data shows AG loan delinquencies rose to 0.55%, and substandard loans make up 8% of farm lending. Small-town banks, strapped for collateral, demand more or raise margins. In South Dakota, a 160-hectare farm was repossessed because the owner couldn't come up with $40,000 for fertilizer. Bankruptcies are spreading like wildfire. Farming success now makes all the difference. Chapter 12 filings jumped 55% in 2024 compared to 2023, and they're rising even faster through mid-2025. These numbers hurt. They remind us of the 1980s, when sky-high interest rates and dirt-cheap crop prices wiped out 200,000 family farms. So it's no surprise that NPR sounded the alarm. If current tariff policies don't change, we may be heading toward the worst farm crisis in 50 years. When jobs disappear, loans freeze up, and property gets seized, the damage doesn't stop at the farm. It ripples through small towns, hitting diners, gas stations, local schools. And this time, unless Washington loosens the tariff noose, the 1980s won't be a warning, they'll be a mirror. The signs are already smeared across once thriving farmlands. Unstable tariffs are tearing through American agriculture. Without urgent action, millions of farms could face a devastating collapse. From piles of unsold sorghum to stuck wheat and soy shipments, and now a falling livestock market, the Midwest is sinking into a cycle of lost income and growing debt. Washington can't keep betting on tariff barriers. Congress must act fast, passing a serious federal aid plan to help cover freight and storage costs, and expanding trade risk insurance so farmers can survive the current season. But saving farming in the short term is only part of the solution. The White House must restart global trade talks, end the tariff fight, and rebuild trust with international buyers. Do you think U.S. tariff policy needs urgent reform to protect our farms? Let us know in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to 3 Daily News and hit that bell so you never miss a deep dive into today's political economy.